Welcome back to the Infinite and Beyond MIT Alumni Show. Of course, I'm your trusted host, Rob Kalwarowsky, and I'm here with fellow MIT 2010, Kristie D'Ambrosio-Correll's with us. Kristie, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Rob.
Thanks for joining us. Obviously, Kristie is now the CEO and co-founder of Decora, which is an incredible car company. And if you go to decora.com, you can check out the car. It looks absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you.
Now, Kristie, before we get into it, tell us a little bit about Decora and what makes it a special car for folks.
Yeah, Decora Motors is a passion project, honestly. Grew out of my love of automotive and my husband, who's also a fellow MIT alum, 2010. And both of our passion for automotive. So you can see if you go to the site, it's very vintage inspired. We really wanted to bring beauty back to the car space. And it is an ultra luxury product. So it's competing with the Rolls Royces of the world in terms of price point. But ultimately, what we focus on and what differentiates us is our cabin experience. So we call ourselves a coach builder. We don't build our powertrain. We actually purchase our powertrain from a trusted provider, both electric and hybrid options. And then from there, we invest in the interior experience. So the car, and this goes to my work back in my MIT days, but the car is built on an intelligence platform. So we really started intelligence first, and we say intelligence, not AI, for a lot of reasons, but it's really designed to become a personalized vehicle. So in 6 months, your car and my car will behave completely differently. The idea is that the car gets to know you, your patterns, your routines, what you enjoy, who you spend time with, where you go. All of those things help it craft your environment. It's not something you have to talk to. You don't have to dictate. You don't have to have a conversation with your car. It just slowly learns you. And our clients have found that to be a very compelling objective.
Mine will learn not to stop at stop signs anymore. Be safe. Be safe.
You'll learn to just roll through them.
Here in Costa Rica, the driving's wild.
I'm sure. One of the things, actually, speaking of obviously being in other countries, that one of the goals is to have the car allow you to really travel like a local. So it knows where you like to stop. It knows where you like to go and what you like to do. And so when you're somewhere that's not home, it can actually help direct you to places that you wouldn't normally find. So we hope that it does bridge a lot of gaps in terms of people's ease of travel and being able to drive there and feel and like a local.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Kristie, of course, we got to ask you the question we start with everyone here is, can you tell us a little bit about you and your journey from graduation in 2010 all the way up to today?
That is a big journey, right? Yeah, of course. So 2010 actually wasn't the end of my MIT journey. I went on to do my MEng for 2011 graduation. So I stayed on for an extra year. Very fortunately, that was the year that actually my husband and I reconnected and ended up started to date. My husband is Eric D'Ambrosio-Correll. Former name was Eric Correll. So we both hyphenated our names when we got married. And so he was staying on in the Boston area. I was staying to do my master's work. And so we ended up reconnecting that year. I had the fantastic opportunity to pursue a lot more of the things that kind of got me excited in my master's year, in all honesty. I spent a lot of my career at MIT really just focusing on qualifying for that master's program, getting the grades I needed to get. I was very serious. If you ask anyone, I was very serious. I had one objective, and that was, to get through school. I'm the first generation of my family to go to college. And so it was very important to me to stay focused on that objective. And so come, my 5th year, I was really able to kind of broaden. Ironically, I did with my journey now, I did take an entrepreneurial class, which was not something I ever thought I would do. But it was a fun class to take, and I learned a lot. It was actually with someone who I was in a group with someone who went on to found and sell a very successful company as well. And I was able to pursue actually more of my passion in AI at the time. I got to write my master's thesis with Patrick Winston, who unfortunately passed away a few years after that. And I was really able to kind of focus on what I loved that 5th year. And of course, date my husband. We ended up getting engaged actually our last day at school in May of 2011, and then came back to New York. I'm originally from New York. I had a job offer waiting for me here, and he followed me here. So we ended up getting engaged right before we left Boston. 2011 through 2012, I worked at Northrop Grumman here on Long Island. It's where I worked all 4 years that I was in college. They had given me a scholarship and an internship for 4 years. I continued my career there for another two, and then my department was being sent to Florida, so I had the option to either move or find a different position. I decided instead to go right into the startup world. So the startup world is where I'd always wanted to be, and so I kind of took the plunge and started interviewing in New York City. And it was my first city startup job. It had all of the hallmarks of city startup life, and it was great. Just spent a lot of time in the city, eating out, spending time with friends, playing board games. Learned the ropes of a lot of what it's like to build a startup. I got to work directly for the CTO at that particular company. And learned a lot of good and bad. At one point in the company, the CEO was removed, and a new CEO was brought in. The company wasn't succeeding. I got to see a transition of power like that. I unfortunately also got to witness burnout to the extreme. In fact, my boss ended up hospitalized due to burnout. And so that very condensed the 2.5 years that I was at that company, I got to experience literally the highs, the lows, the journey of a tech startup and what that looked like. And it was humbling and also really eye-opening. I had a chance to decide whether or not that was a life I wanted to live or whether or not I wanted to write a slightly different story for myself. And ultimately just watching what that journey unfolded and what it created for some people in particular that I cared about, I decided I really wanted to create a different narrative. So I did. I quit that job. That was the first time I quit a job with no job.
Something you have to do sometimes, folks.
You do.
Yep.
You have to take the plunge and sometimes not know where you're going to land. We couldn't pay our mortgage without eating into our savings. So, all the good things of learning when you're young. We did own a house at that point, and had been married already for a couple of years, but it was a really great experience for me to figure out just how far we could contract, not only as a couple and as a family, but how far I could contract kind of as an individual and still survive, and not only survive, but then grow something out of it. And so that was actually when I started my product development firm that still exists today. So DC Creatives grew from a need, one of me wanting to work and continue to work in the space, my love of hardware and software. So figuring out that the startup I had worked for in the city was purely software. Northrop Grumman had been kind of a combination of the two, and wanting to really go back to that. It was 2015 at the time, so IoT was all the rage. Consumer electronics were the thing, and it's where all the innovation was happening. And so that was really what I did. I went out and I became a part of a community. Actually, New Lab in Brooklyn was just starting. It was a fantastic community. And I started to connect with other folks that were in hardware, software, IoT, that maybe needed my services. And I would do jobs here and there, developing products for folks and kind of learning the ropes of not only what it means to run a business, which was the first time I'd ever done that, but also this hardware, software ecosystem space. And so I actually did that for 3 years, various clients, some very successful. And then I found through an investor, one of the investors that was kind of staying close with what other folks were inventing, connected with me and said, "Hey, I actually have a portfolio company, and they just placed a head of engineering, but unfortunately, I feel like you would have been so much better for this founder. Would you like to meet them?" And I was like, absolutely. Like maybe not a full-time position right now if they've already hired someone, but certainly I can consult as I had been doing in my product development firm capacity. So I met with the CEO and founder of Mirror. Her name is Bryn. And we had a great conversation. She did tell me that she had already placed a head of engineering. She was very happy with him at the time. And I wanted to know if I would join full time just as an engineer. I said no. That's not what I wanted to do, but I wished them, all the best. Fast forward 6 months, I'm continuing to do my work. And 6 months later, I see in the news that they raised a $14 million Series A pre-launch before coming to market. Now, in today's world, that is unheard of. Like, that was just a phenomenal thing. Even then, it was phenomenal. And so I sent her a nice email and I said, congrats, seems like everything is going really well. Like, I hope you're well. And she immediately wrote me back and said, hey, can we meet? Like, I need help. And so, it turns out the team was struggling a bit to get the product to market. Their head of engineering was not a great personal fit for her. And they were clashing in a lot of ways. And so she brought me in and she said, can you figure out what's wrong? Like, can you, she wasn't a technical founder. And she said, can you help me figure out how to get this product to market? So I came on, I gave her 10 weeks. I said, I'll give you 10 weeks of my time. I'll embed myself onto your team and I'll tell you, basically what you need to do to get this product to market. And so I did that. On day 2, I had spent a whole day with her team. On day 2, I sat her down. I was basically like, instead of the 2 to 4 weeks that the team thinks you have until you hit market, you've got 8 months. I was like, this was like late February, March. And I was like, you're not going to launch till September. I was like, I think September is the right time. She almost fired me on the spot, in all honesty. It was like, you're useless to me if that's what you're telling me. She's like, all you're telling me is you need time. Like, everyone just says they need time. And I totally got it. I was like, hey, like, if you don't want to give me the time, that's fine. But I also then sat there with her and I said, if you don't want to pay me for the 10 weeks until I get you to that point, then by all means, don't pay me. Like, I will put my money where my mouth is. Like, don't pay me then until we get to that point. She did, of course, but I was willing to do that and kind of show that I could get the product to market. In all honesty, I had never done that before. That was certainly my belief in myself to get that product to market. And so lo and behold, first week of September, we launched the product. At that point, I had now left my product development firm to join the company full time. Eric, my husband, left his job to do the product development firm full time. So we kind of switched off at that point. And I began running Mira's engineering team. We launched in September 28, continued to fundraise for about a year and a half. And then in the winter, let's call it the December of 2019, right before the whole world shut down, we started getting an inkling that Lululemon might be interested in an acquisition offer. So Lululemon had invested in the company about 6 months prior to that, a very small investment in our previous round. And we had done a partnership with them with some content. And then we started having some real conversations. So we had some conversations, December, January, and then they actually flew us to Vancouver for an in-person conversation. And that was when the offer was made. That was actually the week the world shut down and the week the border shut. I was actually in Canada, in Vancouver.
You didn't get stuck?
So Eric was there with me, and actually he and I were escorted across the Toronto border. We were basically the last people to cross the border in Toronto. At the time I didn't realize quite what a thing it was. But we knew something was, we could have gotten stuck in Canada. We thought maybe we'll be stuck in Canada a couple weeks. We would have been stuck in Canada for a really long time. So we were very glad we made it home. All the rest of the Mira team had actually left early. They all had children and all the schools had shut. So they all had to go home and get their kids out of school. Because I didn't have any children and I was the head of engineering, I kind of had to stay and see the product. I was supposed to have the product at a board meeting so that the board could see the Mira and kind of approve the transaction and all of that. But the board meeting ended up getting canceled. So we sat in a hotel room in Vancouver waiting for something that never happened and then praying that we were going to, make it back across the border. We did. All is well that ends well. And then obviously we went straight into. So we had an unusual experience where we did our entire diligence process remote. And so the very beginning of remote work, we were deep in diligence. And because Lululemon was a publicly traded company and everything had to be kept very quiet prior to the acquisition, I was the only technical person that was looped into the deal. I had no support from anyone on my team to get through diligence documentation. Anyone who's gone through an acquisition diligence knows it's It's like a 6-month effort. Like if you think fundraising diligence is bad, it's nothing compared to acquisition diligence. And I couldn't bring anyone in to help me. So I would ask like weird things of my team, be like, can you pull all of the data that does like all of this from this time to this time? And they were just like, why? And I'm like, don't worry about it. It's fine. Don't worry. They were like, okay, you're being weird, but like the whole world is shut down. So like no one could really like see me or like, like tell my body language. So like in some ways, like that also helped a little bit. And then in July of 2020, we officially closed the deal and it became public knowledge. And we joined the Lululemon team. It was a great experience. I stayed with the company for 2.5 years post acquisition, ended up having my daughter while I was at the company. And I learned a lot. I had a chance to report to Calvin McDonald, who was the CEO at the time. I had a chance to present at board meetings, sit in on executive team meetings, see a lot about how a public company works, run books like a public company. Like the most that I learned from Lululemon was about finances and just public company finances. And that was such a great education. And then, I left in very early, very, very early 2023. So I'd already started deciding that I wanted to leave about 4 to 6 months prior to that. But it took a while to transition all of my departments over to Lululemon and to other folks. At that point, I was running hardware and software engineering, product design, IT, manufacturing, logistics, supply chain. So I had a lot of folks.
You do a lot of things, Kristie. In true MIT fashion, I do it all.
Some of it just happened as companies grow, like things end up like, oh, who's this person going to report to? And it kind of just fell under me. Some of it was very natural extension of, things that I was doing. But all of it was a great, experience. I had no experience with supply chain and logistics, and I ran the entire supply chain organization through COVID, which was like the oddest time to ever run a supply chain organization. I had fantastic deputies that reported to me, all of them older than me, more years of experience, specialties in departments that I didn't know anything about. And they taught me so much. Like they were so kind. They let me learn on the job, which you don't always get as an executive. And so, it was a great opportunity. And I literally had the best team. And so, so I left Lululemon in January of 2023. And about a month later, I looked at my husband and I was like, okay, so I want to start a car company. Like, are we ready to tell people that I want to start a car company? I'd wanted to start a car company since I was a teenager. I remember asking my dad when I was really young, was just, if my dad only ever bought American cars for context. This was like his the ideology was, just support local manufacturing, et cetera, when they were still manufactured here. And, I once said to him, I was like, well, if I make a lot of money one day, because obviously I plan to and be very successful, like what's the best American car I can get? It's obviously Rolls Royce is, the British version, and you could get a Ferrari and that's Italian, but like what's the American version? And he was like, we don't have one. Like America doesn't
A
do
Mustang, I guess.
Corvette. Right. The Corvette, the Mustang, muscle cars. Yeah, we have great cars, but we're known for pickup trucks and Henry Ford, and we're, now Tesla, but we're not known for ultra luxury. And so it was kind of always like in the back of my mind that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted America to be known for being able to do high craft, high quality work, which, we absolutely can do here, and we should be proud of that. So around, I guess, February, I think March, we officially incorporated in 2023, and really started to talk about, the fact that we wanted to do an ultra luxury American automotive company. We've been on that journey for now about, I guess close to 3 years now. We raised our first round in, I guess, early 2024, about a year after that. We kind of knew, what we wanted. We put a deck together, whatever. We went out and fundraised. And then about a year later, we did our second round, and we're now in the process of raising our third. So we have a prototype. We've gone out to public. We debuted our product last year, so that was a big year for us. And obviously, you can see all the press that hit about it. auto press is always so funny because it's so snarky, but then everyone's always just like, but I really like what you're doing. Like they want to be so cynical and snarky because, that's the industry, but they're really excited about what we're building. So we do get a lot of support from the industry, and it's been a wild journey since then.
You know how it is. Some people think you have to be critical and snarky to be intelligent, right?
That probably describes the whole car industry.
Kristie, like tell us a little bit about like where you're at now. So you have the car, people can check it out on the website. Like you're looking to raise money. Like how can the MIT community support you at this juncture?
Yeah, we have a car. We're in pre-sale. So of course, anyone that's interested in purchasing, we always ask for connections to our client base. Our client base are obviously, high net worth to ultra high net worth individuals. It's a trusted community. It's a very insular community. So if there are folks that you think our product resonates with, sharing that. Really, most of our marketing is done word of mouth. People share with their friends and they talk about it. That's honestly, that's huge for us. The second thing is like, I am a female founder in the automotive space. I'm actually the first woman to found and head an automotive company ever. And so we know that a lot of data out there that, women just don't get as much venture capital as men. Obviously I do have a male co-founder and that does help a little bit, but even so, we don't get the kind of traction in the VC space that I would if I were a man raising in the space. So any VCs that you think this would resonate with, we love folks that love cars. Sometimes it's a hard sell because they've been burned by a lot of car companies, but we do a pretty good response to that. And so yeah, if there's folks that are interested in what we're building, we love intros to venture funds as well. As a woman fundraising, my best bet is always for a warm introduction. And so I'll meet with anyone, I'll chat with anyone, but always having that warm intro is best.
I think that's everyone. warm intros, warm intros make the world go around.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. And you and I have talked about this, but the the Harvard community is phenomenal at creating that network effect inside. And I think the MIT community, just given the nature that we're engineering focused, we're not necessarily business focused as a brand, we tend to not do as good a job at that. And so any way that I can also connect folks, I do as best I can. So it's a big part of I think what we need to improve as an MIT community.
Kristie, I know we're both working on this. Like, I mean, I've sent a few folks your way, and it's like I really want that to be something that we do as an MIT community more. And you're like Julia, you talked about this on the show. A few other folks also mentioned it. And it's like we need somebody, I keep asking this, I need someone out there who knows how to do software to help us program some sort of app where we can make this more effective.
Well, that I can
Instead
do.
of like
That I
my
can
brain.
That's fine. That I can do. We can chat about that offline, Rob. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is being willing to connect folks, and you basically put your name on the line when you connect individuals. And I never ever doubt that someone that's an MIT alum is worth their weight in gold. Like we're a special community, and we owe it to ourselves to do that. I had this really funny dialogue with my former CEO and co-founder and founder Bryn from Mirror. She was a Harvard alum, and so I always had this like funny dialogue with her that Harvard people were really really good at making money off of MIT people. That's fine. But usually the Harvard person is the one sitting in the CEO seat. And like it or not, they're usually the one making most of the money. And so then that money goes back into the Harvard community, not into the MIT community. And so it's this cycle. And if we want to break the cycle, we have to make sure that the folks that are in the CEO seats, which there's now a bunch of us, especially big name companies, people who've had very large exits, very public companies, they need to then give that back. Because if we don't, then our community doesn't continue to grow in the same way that network did, on the Harvard, Princeton, Yale, whatever side, the liberal arts side. So it's one of the things that we always give back, obviously, to the MIT community, but I try to encourage folks to also just give back because that money needs to recycle back into the engineering community as well.
Absolutely. Now, Kristie, I do want to, you mentioned that you learned a lot about corporate finance working at Lululemon. Like, what are some of the things you learned about finance at a public company that you use today in startups?
Well, one big thing, just that most startups think they will get to eventually is just sort of hygiene, like financial hygiene of just like making sure all your books are clean, making sure you're tracking everything, making sure you're documenting everything you do. Books get very fudgeable because people make mistakes. And so when you're a small company and you're moving fast and things are coming in, you're like, oh, I'll just make a correction for that, or I'll just make a correction for that. And there's a lot of that happens. And it's not to say that like the books are wrong. Obviously, you still have to like, balance your books at the end of the day, and you still have to do your close every month, but it's not nearly as strict as when you're at a public company. And for Lululemon, right, they had their earnings calls. We were expected to have our reports in at a certain time. They had to be clean. They were reviewed by the finance team. And so I actually I think I had a larger budget than the marketing team at one point. And so I had the largest budget on the mirror side of the house. And so I'd have to meet directly with the finance team quite often. And there were things that I learned that I didn't know anything about, like R&D being tax deductible, how we classify that. I did a lot of arguing with the finance team about how to get the most out of that classification for the mirror side, because nearly everything we were doing was R&D, but we had to justify that. We had to prove that. I had to have my team track hours because of that, like things that we wouldn't normally do. So there was a lot of manipulation in terms of, being able to create value for a parent company. And then, ultimately Lululemon did an all cash deal for Mirror, which is $500 million in cash. That's very uncommon.
I hope you got paid.
It was an unusual deal even at the time, but like that much cash transaction was unusual. Now, at the time I thought like, oh, that's so generous. Lululemon was incredibly protective of their equity and their stocks, in fact. So actually they preferred
Of
that.
their pants.
They didn't want to give away stocks. Their stock was so valuable. Obviously, they've had a tough year, but in general, Lululemon is an incredibly valuable stock and always performing well. And so just to have that much cash on the books and be able to use it the way you want, that was very different than the world that we operated in as a startup. Startups, you're always just burning cash and you're looking at runway and you're looking at growth, like reinvesting in growth. And Lululemon was always in the position of maintaining a pretty large stock of cash for rainy day when they need to purchase a company. There was a lot of money to have on hand. And so just their financial conservatism was really interesting, and how they thought about their cash and how they used their cash. And of course, they were Lululemon. They had a lot of buying power and a lot of leverage. Even so, it was a big difference from how startups typically use their cash. And so I do approach a lot of what I do now with Decora with that same mindset. So a lot of people will say, how are you going to go into auto and not burn billions of dollars? And the truth is, because I've learned a lot about where money goes, how to preserve it when you can, how to use it effectively, what is showmanship versus what is actual ROI for a business, and how not to get distracted from a financial perspective. One of my potential investors used the word financial engineering the other day, and he was like, basically, you're doing financial engineering. And it's like, actually, yes, like I do find it equally as interesting as what I do on the engineering side. And it's equally as helpful for running a business.
It's so funny, Kristie, is like last week's episode, or I guess 2 weeks ago, Sophia Massey came on and she started Lionshare's ETF.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up the conversation talking literally about like using engineering first principles as crafting an ETF strategy. And it's like, that's how I think about coaching is I apply basically like first principles, like what are we trying to achieve? And then how do we get there? And like the same systems and principles you learn in like course 2,
Right.
I'm using with people's psychology.
Yep.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just so interesting how like MIT teaches us how to think and how to look at problems and how to put that inside of a box. And then we're all using that way of thinking in different ways to succeed.
Yeah. It's so funny you literally use those exact words. When people ask me, about MIT and about the experience, what I say to them verbatim, what I say is MIT teaches you how to think. That's it. Stop. So when you meet someone else that has also been taught to think that way. You're like kindred spirit, because you instantly speak a language that only if you've been through that hell and been, basically beaten down, taught not to think about anything the way you thought about it because you thought you were amazing and, you got good grades and all that. No, don't think like that. Think the way we want you to think. As soon as you meet someone that also thinks like that, you're like, oh, I'm in a like-minded conversation now. And that's exactly what it is. And if you really, I think one of the failings of the Institute is to prove then to people that actually you can use that education to do so many things. And when I started out on this journey as a CEO, right, I was never a CEO before. I was always a CTO. So many people said to me, but you're such a good engineer, just be a CTO. That's your expertise. That's your education. That's your skill set. Let other people do the CEO work. You don't want to do that. And of course, that's not true. I obviously did want to do that. But to pigeonhole ourselves into thinking that because we were taught to be engineers, that we need to do engineering only is very limiting. And so I like to encourage people to think that engineering is just a way to think that can be applied to finance, to business, to negotiations, to anything in the world. Human psychology is a great one because so many of us struggle actually with interpersonal relationships because it tends to not come as easy to engineers. And so to see that you can actually apply some of what you do and some of how you think to those conversations and those interactions is, I think, a game changer.
Yeah. The one thing I want to mention too, right, is especially as somebody who now, I've talked to a lot of MIT folks on this show, right, is one thing that I think that I want to just reiterate to everybody out there is we come out of MIT being kicked in the face over and over and over again. And we talk to folks and it's there's some lasting damage there where we feel
Yeah.
like maybe we're not good enough or we feel like we don't belong or we always know someone who's
Who's
smarter,
smarter.
who's better, who's more accomplished, who's blah, blah, blah than we are. But you're incredible. And you went to probably one of the hardest schools in the world.
Right.
And even making through that makes you far beyond most people. And I know that sounds very egotistical and I don't want it to come off that way. But I just want everyone to know is you have incredible skills and you're incredibly strong and powerful and applying your skills, whatever course you took, to wherever you want to go, you can learn anything.
Anything. You hit the nail on the head, right? We were basically traumatized for 4 years, right? You were told you're not as good as you think you are. For 18 years, you've thought you were smart. Now I'm going to put you in a room of the most brilliant people in the world. And they truly are. And also some of the best people in the world. And because they're also good people, it feels even worse that they're so smart. We feel like I'm so inferior. These are all wonderful people. I remember I took 6001 the second half of freshman year, and this was brand new to me. I knew nothing about computer science. I didn't even know what code was. I didn't even know what it looked like. I had no clue. And kids had already taken AP computer science. And there was one student who took pity on me, and he was top of the class. And he taught me, he sat with me for hours and you're like, I want to hate you because you're so good, but also you're so nice. And he's the only reason I even made it through that class. And then this ended up being my career, right? So one person's kindness at MIT was changed my whole life, And so it almost makes it a little worse because you want them to be enemies, but they're not because it's actually a pretty collaborative environment as opposed to the other Ivies. And so you do come out thinking you have imposter syndrome. You're yeah, sure, I made it through MIT, but I'm not that great. I know people that are so much better than me. And so what I came out with, where I finally landed, going through that trauma and being okay, well, I can't hate myself. I can't think I'm worthless. I really have always gone back to the idea that every single person at MIT was there for a reason and they were the best at something. They may not have been the smartest in that class. They may not have been whatever it was, but they were the best at something. And if you can find what your special superpower is and hold on to that, and of course that may change and grow and evolve as it should as you're a human being, that I think is what continues to anchor me. MIT was my base. It was the beginning. Everyone that got through it, and even some that didn't get through it, I know some brilliant people that didn't make it all the way through. It doesn't mean they're any less brilliant. that is your base. That is your starting point, but it is not the end of the journey in any way. And so finding what makes you really special and using that, exploiting that with the training that you've had. So yeah. It's hard though. It's abuse. It's they don't tell you that when you decide to go there, you're going to be abused for 4 years. But you kind of are, and you want it in some weird way.
That's one thing. So last week's episode is Rob Fleischman,
Mhm.
and we actually connected over a post on LinkedIn where he was posting the quote from Sally Hornbluth, who said, like, there's only one way through MIT, it's the hard way.
Yeah.
And he wrote the post, like he posted, and he was like, I don't want my kids to go to MIT. And I was like, I need to know more. But like for me, I look back and I go, like I look at my sister went to a great college in Canada, and I go, and like I met some kids who did the Cambridge exchange,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I was like, honestly, for me, I don't think I could have gone to a better college for me in that moment.
Right.
Like I needed the constant, otherwise I wouldn't have done anything.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, look, I have a daughter, and I've thought about this a lot actually. We're two MIT alums that have a kid. You know, you think like, will my kid feel destined to go to MIT? And the truth is, like, I only want her to go if she wants to go. I wanted to go. I really wanted to go. I wanted to go so bad that like I had like a spreadsheet of every single, it was when I got there, I had a spreadsheet of every class I had to take and the grade I had to get in order to qualify to get into the MEng programs. I was so
You were a
focused.
true MIT student.
And then what I didn't know was that actually they decide whether or not you get into MEng at the end of your junior year. Of course, I should have realized that. Like, they can't wait till the end of your senior year to evaluate you. But I was like, I was 18. I wasn't thinking. And so at the end of my junior year, I was 0.05 short of the GPA requirement because I needed one more semester. And I went into the course 6 office, and these poor ladies probably thought I was going to like hurt myself or something. And I was like, you don't understand. Here's my spreadsheet. I was like, I've done all of the grades I need to get in all of the classes I need to get, and I have 4 more classes to go, and you just need to give me one more semester. And they were like, we don't do that. Like, it's like a hard rule. Like, you have to have the GPA or you're not in. And I was like, you don't understand. And I was like pleaded with these women, pleaded my case, and they were like, okay. Like, okay, you need a recommendation from someone, and we'll put you on probation for the semester, and you have to have the GPA where it is at the end of the semester, and you need a recommendation letter. I think I needed 2 actually, one from a teacher and one from like a professional recommendation. And I was like, okay, and like sure enough, like I obviously like I completed it and whatever. But these women were probably like, who is this psycho, right? And like, but that was how focused I was on what I needed to accomplish. And for me, like, it taught me so much about my resilience, like my ability to speak for myself, advocate for myself, plan, and then execute. And I've gone back to that many times, which is like when I didn't know how to bring a product to market like mirror. I'd never brought a mirror to market before. Why did I think I could do that? Right. And it was like, well, I trusted my ability to make a plan and execute on that plan, you know, come hell or high water, like it was going to effing happen. Like there was nothing that was going to stop me from doing that. And I proved that to myself while I was there. Like there was nothing that could stand in my way that I wasn't at least going to get through. It may not be the way I wanted. It may not have been as perfect as I wanted, but I was going to get through it. And that resilience, you know, obviously allows me to do what I do now. Running a company is, especially a car company, is, you know, takes a lot of resilience. People really want to not have you succeed. There's a lot to overcome every day and go with a positive attitude. So I agree with you. I think MIT was exactly what I needed. And I don't know if I've told you this, but my family uh, did qualify for financial assistance because we very much needed it for for my family to be able to afford MIT, but not 100%. And actually, most of my tuition was covered by an anonymous benefactor. I think he
Amazing.
was like class of 1968 or something. I never knew who it was. I had to write like a letter at the end of every year, just like thanking him, telling him everything I'd done. But because of the kindness of another MIT individual, like I even had that opportunity, you know, to attend. So think a lot of people and a lot of luck for getting me here.
Amazing, folks. Kristie, It's amazing. I wish I had money to invest because I would give it to you just on that alone. Now I'm like, you are going to make it happen. It's like it's clear. It's so obvious. I mean, yeah.
I genuinely believe that I will in one way or another because I want it that bad. And I tell people that all the time. If this is your dream and this is what you want to put out into the world, you will find a way to make it happen, especially when it comes from a very true place in your heart, because I do think the world needs what is deep in each individual's heart. Like that's why you're here. And so as true as you can be to yourself, the world will need what is in you. So I genuinely believe that. I meet a lot of founders, a lot of young founders who are like, is this really the thing like everyone needs? And I'm like, if you think it is, and if it's so genuine and true to you, it will resonate.
100%. And folks, and if you're on that journey, reach out. I help
Please
people
do.
do that.
Please do. I
And
really,
then,
I do love advising as you do too,
yeah. And so I've dropped Kristie's LinkedIn and podcast notes, obviously Decora.com. You can check that out. If you want to get her pitch deck or anything, feel free. You can reach out to me or Kristie. We can send it your way. And then obviously, if you know any folks who want to buy a badass car, yeah, definitely they can
Let me
connect
know.
yeah, definitely they can connect to Kristie as well. Everybody, I mean, Kristie, it was an incredible interview. I wish I didn't have a call in 1 minute because I'd love to keep going. But it was great to chat, and everyone, thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, Rob, you need to do like an in-person meetup. You need to like host like a reunion of sorts for some folks.
So we're recording this. I've already talked about this with Kamo. I do want to do a retreat and actually with Jim Dunn, who was also on the show, but I am trying and I want to put together a retreat here in Costa Rica.
Yes.
There's a bunch of retreat centers out here. We can get it together. We can do really cool stuff like paragliding, fishing, rappelling down waterfalls, breath work. If we want to do psychedelics, we can do that too.
Here in Costa Rica.
Whatever you want, but I want to make that happen. So if you're interested in that, send me an email or reach out on LinkedIn and we'll make that happen because I would love to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. You should. I feel like that's part of your calling.
Absolutely. Everyone, thank you so much for listening and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, Rob.